Good evening. Please stand for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Krupa?
Here.
Spanky?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo? Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak?
Here.
Mr. Edison?
Here.
This time, I'll have a motion to go into executive session for items number 1, 5, 7, and 8.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Second.
Oh, second. Any questions? No? Roll call? Oh, all those in favor?
Aye.
We'll be back at approximately 7:30. Everybody ready? Yep. Good evening. We are going to reconvene the meeting. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And this meeting is being reconvened from our 7 o'clock start time. Mr. Smythe, roll call, please.
Mr. Gart?
Here.
Mr. Hall? Here. Mr. Krupa? Here. Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
He is not here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Wondrak? Here. Mr. Adnezia?
Here. Thank you. All right, we will start with policies.
Good evening, everyone. We have one policy for first reading, and that was the policy that we tabled at the last meeting. I want to point out, this is policy 9210, parent organizations. And there was a phrase in the policy that had been stricken out because it was not in the policy that came to us from Strauss Esme, but it was in Wall Township's version of the policy. And what is supposed to happen under those circumstances is that the section of a policy that exists in our version but not in Strauss Esme is supposed to be highlighted in yellow so that the board members can see the difference and decide whether or not they want to keep those words or whether or not, or if they want to remove them and have the policy exist in the exact form as it does in Strauss Esme. So the words that were mistakenly stricken out and should have been highlighted in yellow instead are in the third paragraph where it says such approval must be sought by written application to, and then here's where that phrase begins, first via building administration and then confirmed by the superintendent or designee. So first via building administration and then confirmed by should have been highlighted in yellow and was stricken out by mistake. So it's now there in yellow, and it's my recommendation that we keep those words and not take them out as Strauss Esme's version has them out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So when this comes for first reading next week, those words will no longer be yellow, they won't be stricken out, they won't be bold, they'll just be in there, okay? All of the other policies are second readings, and the board did not have any issue with them at our last meeting, so this would be your opportunity to tell me if now you have some concerns.
I don't have any concerns, but with regards to the last one, which I believe was on bus issues, it seems thorough, and I saw that there's some trainings which it mentions, and it's just informational. It's not a problem at all. It's just who does the trainings, and being that so often first aid is mentioned in the training, is that basic first aid part of it, because it doesn't really make that clear in the bulleted list portion of it, but it does reference minor first aid and that kind of thing throughout the policy.
So the training for bus drivers and transportation paras is provided by a number of individuals. It depends on what the training is. A lot of the training is done by the transportation supervisor, who is a certified trainer. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Adnezio. Good evening, everyone. May I lead you through the agenda here? The first item, and I did include a handout that I brought tonight, is an update on the state assessments. high school graduation requirements. On October 21st, the Department of Education and State Board of Education held a special meeting in which they announced a proposed notice of some substantial changes to the state assessment requirements. So I'm going to kind of bring you back in the packet. There's a timeline included in there. We had an amended consent order that began in October of 2018. It was amended twice since then, which granted the graduating classes of 2019, 20, and then 21 and 22 that flexibility if they did not meet the proficiency level on the ELA 10 and Algebra 1. If you remember back in 2017, they had to pass those two assessments, or they did not meet their high school graduation requirements, which put, a burden on students. We had to create some refresher courses, some courses for students to have an online class so that they could take a refresher and then retake the assessment. And then in October of 2018, and then amended in February, the state then allowed for more flexible pathways. So some of the alternate pathways that the students were allowed to use if they didn't pass the ELA 10 or the Algebra 1 assessment, they went back to allowing the SAT, a certain cut score on the SAT, the ACT, the Accuplacer, and then also the portfolio appeals process. So we are still following that for the classes of 2019 through the graduating class of 2022. But on October 21st, the Department of Education proposed the following changes for the classes of 2023 through 2025, which is our current 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And if you look on, it's page 4 of the document that I shared with you. This proposed change allows for testing from grades 3 through 9 to continue on an annual basis, but it decouples the assessments with graduation requirements. So grades 3 through 9 would have an annual New Jersey State assessment that would be used for school and district accountability, still be getting the same reports on proficiency levels, meeting student growth targets, and so that would be grades 3 through 9. Grade 10, there would not be an assessment. It would be moved to grade 11, but the grade 11 assessment would be grounded in the standards for ELA 10, Algebra 1, and Geometry, and it would be a comprehensive assessment for both ELA and math. So, there's some positives and negatives to these proposed changes. I think minimizing or decreasing some of the assessment is important, but we do have to consider the fact that students are far removed from grade 10 ELA when they take this assessment in spring of 2011 and the spring of their 11th grade year. And depending on when they took Algebra 1, they could have taken that as early as 7th grade, and Geometry, and they would be taking this comprehensive assessment again in their junior year. So there's still some considerations about how we're going to support students in making sure that they're prepared and, that there's some sort of refresher for that assessment. This is under a 60-day comment period right now, so it has not been adopted. So I'll keep you apprised as I, am, updated on the changes. But that is what is being proposed right now, and that would be the classes of our current 7th, 8th grade and 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
So how is it different, in your learned opinion, from the old HESPA?
I think we're coming full circle. The old HESPA was a comprehensive assessment. I don't know, without seeing the new assessment, how different those assessment items will look for ELA and the math items. especially, as I said, because some of our students are far removed from those content areas by the time they become juniors. We have lots of juniors that have already taken Algebra 1 and geometry, so I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but I do think in many ways we're coming full circle. Now, this only addresses ELA and math. Right now, the science assessment, which was revamped, is still proposed, will maintain the timeline that we're on right now, which is that 5th graders take the science assessment, 8th graders, and 11th graders. So that does not impact the state science assessment. You're welcome.
And that test for 11th grade determines whether those kids can graduate?
So it is their graduation assessment requirement, not unlike the HESPA, but the only difference is if they do not pass it, we also then go back to a HESPA-like format where we're required to provide remediation, allow them to retake the test, and if they don't pass, they are allowed to use those alternate options. So they can use whatever the cut score will be for SAT, ACT, AccuPlacer, and in a worst-case scenario, the portfolio appeals. So there are multiple options for pathways to graduation.
Right. And I apologize for using, abbreviations and acronyms, but HESPA stood for High School Performance or Proficiency Assessment. And back when we had the HESPA, students took it in the fall of 11th grade. If they were unsuccessful, they could retake it in the spring of 11th grade. If they were unsuccessful, they could retake it in the fall of senior year. And if they were unsuccessful, they went into this portfolio appeal process. So it sounds like there's going to be similar safety nets, if you will. For our students, we have very few students who have to go through a retake or a portfolio appeal. We have in the past, but as Dr. Gleason was saying, we're not really sure if this assessment is going to be similar to or different from the ones of the past. Part of the reason why New Jersey moved away from the HESPA is that they thought that the test was not rigorous enough, and it was not a good indication of a student's potential for success in college. When you looked at HESPA passing rates and compared them to SAT scores or, things like that, there was, quite a bit of a discrepancy. So they moved towards these other assessments in order to kind of increase the rigor and look for more alignment in terms of that predictability for college success. So if we're going full circle, then I'm not concerned about our students' ability to be successful. If the test is going to be substantially different, then we don't know.
Any other questions, comments?
Do you know if there will be an option for students to take the test prior to grade 11?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
You mentioned you haven't seen it yet. Will they be doing field testing or anything like that with it?
So I was a part of the assessment outreach team where, they had different groups of stakeholders. It was educators, administrators, parents, and community members. And they were still in the preliminary stages of designing, test items and deciding who they were partnering with at that point, and that was last year. And I have yet to see any, and I don't anticipate we'll see any kind of publicly released items until they actually provide the test. And they are not talking about a field test to begin. I think, the plan is, if this goes forward, that we'll be administering the new assessment. So
In 2 years, our current ninth graders.
That's correct. That is not until this class of 20.
That's a pretty quick timeline.
Yeah. So we still don't know much. But I will keep you apprised as I get more information. Okay, if there's no further questions on the updates to state assessment, the next agenda item is the Future Educators Academy. Last year in the spring, I provided the board an update on a new academy that we were proposing for the high school, which is, we're calling it the Future Educators Academy. The concept or rationale behind the Future Educators Academy was to looking at teacher shortages, which there's well-documented teacher shortages in the United States, looking at opportunities for our students that may be aspiring to the field of education and not just limited to teaching. Our idea behind the academy is to also expose the students to other careers in education, administration, counseling, child study team, so they would be, really being able to expose to a wide breadth of the different opportunities. So we've been working with Georgian Court on a dual enrollment program so that our students could have the opportunity to, right now, have 9 college credits if they transcripted through Georgian Court. And we also worked with the New Jersey Teacher of the Year, Jennifer Scomiel, who's also the Tomorrow's Teacher Director up in Middlesex County. And we have a team of administrators going to 2 different districts that also have Tomorrow's Teacher or Future Educators Academies in their schools. So we'll be going on the 22nd and the 26th. But the goal is that we'll have everything in place for September of 2020, next school year, for our students. And we're working with the intermediate school to do some student surveys and parent surveys. We presented at the Academy Night at Wall High School in October, and getting the word out there to students and to their parents to let them know that this opportunity will be available. Basically, what students will do is have their regular curriculum at the high school level, and they'll have 2 electives that in most years their electives will be sort of already set, just like they would be in most of the other academies. They're geared towards the college classes, the dual enrollment classes, which are mostly psychology classes. So the students would come out, if you're graduating from the Future Educators Academy, a student who completes all 4 years would come out with AP Psych, and they would get 3 credits for matriculated students, Educational Psych, which would be 3 credits, and then Child and Adolescent Psych. So they would come out with 9 credits, and the cost to accredit the courses at Georgian Court would be $480. So I think it's a nice start for a lot of students, regardless of where they're going. And we're working with the university to try to see if they can get us some kind of transfer alignment with other universities beside their school to see how those psych classes might transfer to other state universities, Rutgers, and a variety of other universities through the state. So we're excited about that, and hopeful that we'll have students who are excited about the classes.
Question. So how would that work with the existing programs we have now? Do you anticipate additional staff that would be needed for certain specialty classes, or would there be an overlay where, someone that would be in this academy for psych would also work in another academy or a different area?
So in year 1, we don't anticipate any additional staffing. We're looking at potentially running this under the Family Life Program, although it could be run under, any number of departments for supervision. And so we're looking to use existing staff and where those openings are right now to have those teachers teach the class. As far as the psychology courses, those would not begin until their 11th grade year, the dual enrollment. Now, that's an area that we do have to be mindful of, because in order to have the Georgian Court dual enrollment class, that has to be taught with by a teacher who has a master's in field, not just the psychology certification. We have a teacher with psychology certification right now. So we do have to think about who that staff member will be by that school year so that that teacher can teach those 2 classes. But right now, no, we don't anticipate in the upcoming school year the need for any additional staff, and the AP Psych class would be already taught by the current teacher who teaches that class. So
Thank
for
you.
the first 2 years were covered.
Lisa, a couple questions. The academy, you said you hope to get students. Has there been any surveys done to generate interest or find out whether there's a need for this?
Yes, so we're going to be administering a survey over at the intermediate school, which will probably be happening in the next couple weeks. We did have I believe about a dozen students over at Academy Night who came specifically for that academy, and their parents to learn a little bit more about that. And then we'll also be sending out in the next couple of weeks to the parents as well, so that the parents can give us some input on their thoughts on an academy for education.
And are there any other schools like in the area or in the state that have something like this
There-
currently? Because I know there's plenty that have engineering and science and business and other stuff.
Yeah, there are quite a few. Some operate Tomorrow's Teacher is an existing curriculum. It doesn't necessarily have to have a four-year academy pathway, but Middletown runs a Tomorrow's Teacher. We're going to be visiting Point Pleasant Borough on November 26th. They have a four-year academy with Tomorrow's Teacher, and we're also visiting on November 22nd Upper Freehold Regional. They have a four-year Future Educators Academy, dual enrollment. Point Pleasant is partnered with Ryder and Upper Freehold, I'm not sure which university. So we're visiting, the administrators are going there, we're meeting with the teacher, we're observing a class, and then meeting with the administrators to sort of talk about what worked, what didn't work. But there are quite a few, and if you look at the Tomorrow's Teacher website, they list all of the districts in New Jersey, and it's pretty extensive. So I don't know how full their enrollment is, but we thought we'd start with some of the districts and Matawan has offered a site visit as well. So, we'll
And
see,
just-
I'm not sure how their enrollment is, but they've offered us a visit as well.
And is Georgian Court the best option for us because of its location, or just because we think it's the best option? Is Rutgers offered opportunities for us, or Keene, or Trenton State, or any other schools that have the similar type of educational programs that would provide us a better marketability, per se? No offense to Georgian
Possibly.
Court,
No,
but
possibly, absolutely. And I think that's up to us to pursue, who we feel is a good fit. I'm looking at the different schools that offer these programs. They seem to all be partnered with different universities. So we started with Georgian Court, but we don't necessarily, that doesn't have to be the dual enrollment program, but we have started a conversation with them to see how that partnership fits. I think the one piece that we're looking for from whether it's Georgian Court or whoever is that course transferability. Because, if I'm sending my child through this academy and they're going to be taking college-level courses, that's great. It prepares them for the rigor. It immerses them in the field of education to see if that's really what they want before I send them to college. But what I want to know is, will those credits transfer not just as electives, but hopefully as the psychology credits? So that's one of the pieces we're still working on.
so we'll hear more about this as time goes on.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I have a question. In regards to, so we have the course curriculum, part of the program with the Future Educators Academy, will there be any mentorship opportunities or community outreach to kind of engross the students into the field besides the courses?
So part of the Tomorrow's Teacher curriculum has 4 modules. The way we're looking at the curriculum right now is the first 2 modules will be taught in freshman year. And I think that's good because it's the basics, it's theory, it's really immersing them in just understanding what the field of education is. But by the time they get to their senior year where they have modules 3 and 4, that involves a capstone experience where they're actually in a classroom, and we'll be organizing that where we'll be busing students over to the elementary schools, and they'll have almost like a student teaching type experience. And so they'll really have that classroom experience. We're also looking at creating an internship experience similar to our other academies, and with our RAP program, that's a possibility that we might be able to also offer them a paid internship in their junior year after school during RAP, and then in their senior year, they would have that classroom teaching experience.
That's great.
So that would
Thank
be
you.
an essential part of the academy. Yeah,
That's a great idea.
thanks. Any other questions on Future Educators Academy? Okay, next update, I wanted to make the board aware of the program evaluations that are happening right now. We've begun with 3 program evaluations, and as you know, we present the findings of those program evaluations to the full board in the spring. So I wanted to just give you an update where we've begun a K-12 world language program evaluation. We have begun grades 6 through 12 science. And then tomorrow we begin the first meeting for grades 6 to 12 health and phys ed. So we have teams of teachers, a steering committee led by administrators and teacher leaders. In those first meetings, they've already set the timelines for the school year on how they're going to be working through the program evaluation, setting goals and action plans. And I will be presenting to the board during workshop any items that might have a budgetary consideration within the first year. as we are, finalizing budget. So I will talk to the board prior to the full presentation about any items that might be included in the budget development that are aligned with those program evaluations. And then we'll do, like we did last year, present the full program evaluation to the board in April or May for the 3 of those content areas. Any questions on program evaluations? Okay, the last item, I know several board members had asked for an update on the observatory, and Mr. Lee was able to give me an update last week. So currently, we have identified the issues, the technical issues with the observatory, and it was determined to have a bad motor on one of the axis controls, and as well as the outdated software, which we knew about, and that obviously controls the overall operation of the system. We've been out there, I've been out there with Mr. Lee. We were out about 4 or 5 weeks ago. We have a student, Will Sargent, who contacted he contacted us last year. His grandmother was involved in the original foundation that purchased the observatory, and he belongs to a gifted and talented astronomy, I don't really know the name of it, but it's aligned with Princeton University. But he has a real interest and a talent and vocation for astronomy, and he was interested in trying to help us, identify what was going on. But we also are working with the Star Astronomy Club, and they've been out there in the observatory, and they were very, very helpful in identifying the issues that we had. So we're in a holding pattern right now because the gentleman from Star Astronomy is out of the country, but according to Mr. Lee, the goal is in the spring to have the telescope fully operational. We don't want to be working with the observatory and the equipment in the cold of winter. We have met with InfoAge, met us out there back in October also, and so they're right alongside of us. We're hoping to get this up and running by spring for curricular purposes and doing a lot of partnering with them with their telescope and, the equipment that they have at Camp Evans. So we may have an article that'll be in the Coast Star this Thursday when we were out at the observatory back about 6 weeks ago. And Will Sargent was there, and InfoAge representative was there. And so we put together an interview, and it should be in this Thursday.
Oh, Lisa, the Star Astronomy Group, they're from Brookdale? Aren't they from one of the local colleges?
I'm not exactly sure with which university or college
Okay.
that they're affiliated.
I couldn't remember if it was Brookdale or Monmouth, but I think it's one of the area universities.
It's an area university, but I'm not sure. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
Dr. Gleason?
Yes.
So the bad motor, is that covered under warranty?
I don't believe so, and it's about $1,500, the motor. That's what they're estimating right
Okay.
now.
And then the outdated software and new software, I guess, would have to cost some money.
So there will be, although currently with what Mr. Lee has been looking at, he hasn't given us a final estimate, but he said the biggest item would be the motor, which he has costed out at $1,500. So the software, I anticipate the updates to that will not be as expensive.
So, just backing up, because I've been on the board the whole time that this has been in the works, it was never operational. I mean, there were a couple test runs with it, but, so, I mean, essentially, the motor should be pretty much brand new. So if it was a faulty motor, has anybody looked to the company that sold it to us to see if it would be under warranty or why it's a faulty motor? Did something go wrong with its shipping? Because
Yeah, and, you're right. Since I've been here in 2017, it has not been operational. I understand there was some operation prior to 2017, but I don't know to what extent.
Yeah.
You would certainly know more than me.
it was just test runs. So I think we were, at one point, we saw a couple pictures it was taken, and there were some issues, and something with the way it was sitting wasn't right. So there's been issues all along with it, but I think it's a great thing. And I've been looking forward to this being up and running, as, many people, so.
Sure.
They've been very helpful. They have. But I think one of the things that has been discussed is the original design with the software that was originally purchased was that people in the community would be able to log in and then operate the telescope, position it to whatever they wanted to see. And the advice that we've received from InfoAge and from the Star Astronomy Group is that, given the type of equipment that we bought and the complexity of that equipment, that would be a bad idea, letting people manipulate the telescope, through the computer. That the better approach would be to have us position the telescope at certain times. Like the other morning, you could see Pluto in front of the sun if you were up early, and which I was, but missed it. But you would be able to see Pluto if you were looking at the right place. So it would be incumbent upon us to position the telescope, make people aware that this is a good day, a good night, you want to log in so you can see X, and not risk having them actually manipulating the telescope, running the motors, things like that, because it is expensive equipment that is very sensitive.
But it still allows the community to have some of the benefit of that by logging onto the website. There would be a link to look at that, but we would, as Mrs. Dyer said, control that. But I will talk to Mr. Lee about looking into, I don't know if they've pursued, the original warranty on that and where we are with that, because I don't know the year that it was purchased, but it certainly, as you said, has not gotten much use, but I don't know where we are. I'll check in with him on that. You're welcome. That's all I have for everyone. Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions or anything? No? Okay. Seeing none. Finance and facilities.
Okay, first on the agenda is item 1, enterprise account update. Attached, you have the food service revenue expense report through the end of October. Similar to last year, it was a positive month. Last year, for the month of October, the profit was $22,000. This year, for the month of October, for the month, it's $29,984, nearly $30,000. But what is important to note is that our year-to-date, that we're already in the black, $7,000, as opposed to this time last year, where we were in the negative $22,000 at the end of October. So we have a very good start to the year. And the only difference between this year and last year, over the 2 months, is that we've had one additional day of school. But
Brian?
sure.
With that, have we, I know after school, there's limited things they offer, but seeing that lunch is so early in the day, has there been any talk as to expanding the after-school menu, maybe offering hamburgers and things like that?
If there has, it hasn't been with me. So
I mean, is that
I believe they do.
do that? I thought it was a somewhat of a limited menu, so I thought
It
it
is
was like
limited, but I
pizza.
think it's limited and it's directed at what the students want. And
Okay.
they want something quick, it's easy, they're carrying it, they walk it to, their practice. I thought they had burgers at one point, but I think the majority of it, students want pizza. They get,
Okay.
and it's, I believe they order it, they get it from Attilio's, which is a little different than what they're served during the day. But whatever it is, it's popular, it's been a popular program, we're drawing about $5,000 a month. But it is a conversation that I'll bring back and discuss with the food service department.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want a wrap update, Mr.? Okay. So with regard to the other enterprise account, the WRAP program, they're also currently in the black after October's expenses to about $23,000. There's only $1,500 in arrears for October, which reflects 7 families, and we've been in contact with them. One family has received a notice of suspension until payment is made in full, but $1,500 out of, $46,000 that's invoiced in a month is really a very good situation to be in there. Conference days, we offered an extended amount of time for parents who needed to have their children in the after program. On conference days, that was very successful. We don't charge additional for that. We just offer it to them. But it was very well received, very much appreciated, and we'll be providing a sign-up form for November 27th, which is an early release day as well, to see how many people are interested in that. So, all's well. Thank you.
Okay, item number 2, facility use applications. Any facility use that extends 4 months or more comes to the Board of Education for approval. The attached facility use application is for the Wall Township Recreation Department. This had previously been brought to the board and approved. However, it's been amended, so it's going to be brought to the board again for approval. What they're looking to do, we provided the email attachment describing it, is they want to extend the day, extending time rather than ending at 2:30 to end at 3:30. What that will do, it'll incur a cost to the school district because we're going to have to pay overtime. As you're aware, our Saturday schedule, we have custodians scheduled as part of their regular work schedule, so it's not an additional expense to the district. So therefore, any events that are held on a Saturday, specifically the rec program, the basketball program, there's no charge for it. However, by extending the time at the intermediate school for these dates will require extending the staff's time, and there'll be a charge that would be associated with it. However, I'll bring to the board whether the board would like to waive the fee or assess the fee. But it would be a custodial charge fee, not a facility use fee. It's for the time the custodian will be working overtime. And the anticipated amount for the year is $1,125.
So with that, Brian, can you talk about the other benefits we get from the township? I mean, for instance, our varsity soccer teams play on the turf field for no charge.
Correct. I mean, there's plenty of things that we do as a shared service. However, I bring this to the board only because it's outside the normal schedule. It's started snowing a little bit today, and over the course of the school year, we will be relying on the town to come in and assist us with plowing parking lots, et cetera, which they do not charge us, salting of the lots, et cetera.
So if we were to put it into a dollar value, we are getting much more from them dollar-wise than we would be giving to them. If we were actually exchanging money for the plowing and for the use of the fields and things of that nature.
I don't know that a complete analysis has ever been done. With regard to this cost of $1,000, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think you would have to also include the cost of all the Saturdays for all the buildings. Granted, we incorporate that into a regular schedule,
Right.
but we do that so that there is no additional cost associated with programs running on a Saturday. If you're asking my recommendation, you waive the fee and we
Yes.
provide the overtime. Sorry?
Is this for things like mini basketball?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the hour?
No. It's an hour
I
long.
think they have, based on the student participation, trying to get the number of games in, they can't fit the number of games they need to fit within the time frame. So they need to be there for an additional hour to get another game in. So maybe they ended up with 2 more teams, at this age bracket that plays at the intermediate school. So, any questions on the permit, and we're okay with waiving the fee and approving it?
Yeah, how's everybody feel?
Absolutely.
You're fine? Good?
No problem with that.
Okay.
It'll be on the agenda next week for approval. Open Public Records update, year-to-date, because we do this on a fiscal year, we've received 54 requests, 47 have been completed, we have 7 currently pending, none are overdue, 1, an extension was requested, or advised to the requester that an extension was necessary to provide the documents. There's been a total of 219 hours spent on responding, providing documents for Oprah, and the cost associated with those 219 hours is a little over $14,000, $14,086. Any questions? Item 4, facility project updates. You have attached Central School main door. That work was done, scheduled for Thursday and Friday of last week. I believe the work was done on Friday. The work was essentially complete, and they're still finishing up some minor punch list items. Paving at the Old Mill School, the county was not able to complete it in accordance with their initial schedules. They were delayed due to the weather earlier in the fall, so that work is being scheduled for the break in April. Additionally, we will also, 2 other items that have been on the list, we'll have to discuss it as we move through the year from a budgetary basis, is the paving at the West Belmar School, as well as paving of the parking area by Special Services. That was on a tentative list to be included. If you're aware, Special Services does not have any paved area where the staff park going into the building. It's dirt. But the county's not going to be doing any further paving for the district no earlier than April of next year. The rooms at the high school, B2 and B4, the carpeting was replaced over the break. That work is complete. The AC by Sunnyfield, they're still working out the punch list. There's been a number of ongoing issues with controls, with specific units not responding as well as we would like, running hot or running cold, dampers being too wide open. They've attributed to some adjustments that needed to be made on the units themselves as recommended by the manufacturer. They believe that any changes to the units have been addressed, and now they're trying to tweak the controls so that they operate on a more consistent basis. But it's been narrowed down to only a few rooms at this point, and mainly at, I believe, Old Mill and West Belmar. I think Allenwood's been pretty consistent, and the high school's been pretty consistent on a daily basis. But we monitor the temperature and performance of the units on a daily basis. We get a report from the custodial supervisors.
Going forward, so if they fix these issues and 6 months, a year from now, we start having problems with them, what kind of warranty do we have?
There's a maintenance bond there's a warranty by the manufacturer, but in addition to that, I believe it's a 2-year maintenance bond by the contractor. So the contractor will be responsible first to come out for the
Okay.
first 2 years.
Hey,
So,
Brian.
because that was also a concern, we've discussed it with the principals, we kind of went right through the cooling season while we were still installing them and making adjustments, so there's not there's some concerns that we're gonna hit the cooling season again and we're gonna run into issues, but we're gonna make sure prior to closing out this project, if we even have it closed out by then, that we'll be assured that Sunnyfield Corporation will be responding to any concerns, any issues that we have when we hit the cooling season again.
Brian, they're able to fix those at this time of year with AC and the temperature being 34 degrees outside or whatever, or does the
No,
system not?
well, that's what I mean, we kind of, when they were installed, it was at the very end of August, right at the beginning of September. So we were in a cooling session, and they were tweaking them, and they were making adjustments, and then we went out of the cooling season. So what we're currently working on are heating issues. So what the concern is that maybe not all the air conditioning issues have been resolved. So when we hit the cooling season again in the spring, we'll be assured that Sunnyfield will be back out to address them. And they've been a very responsive contractor so far. And, the initial delay on the units was not the fault of the contractor, that was the manufacturer having delays. And that was not just Wall Township, that was nationwide.
So each school is monitored by the head custodian in each of the schools, and then that feeds back to the district supervisor?
Yeah, well, in operations, they can view all the schools, so
Okay,
there's a
so they have
computer there.
access to the controls.
They have the
can
access
get in and
to
see it.
the controls to view what's happening. What I've asked the custodial supervisors do at the 4 schools where we've done the work is every morning take a screenshot of the current status of the units, send it to me, to Sunnyfield, and also the engineer, so that they see on a daily basis what's going on with the units, so that there's no issue of, well, we didn't know, or, you know, at the end of the week, we're getting back to them. So every morning, each custodial supervisor takes a screenshot of the, it's like a schedule of the units. It's giving you the room temperature, the damper position, the heating valve, so you get a snapshot of it. And granted, it's only a snapshot, you know, at that moment, but that information is being fed to the contractor. And if there's a question on any of the rooms, if we're tripping, you know, a freeze stat, if we're tripping anything, that's being communicated also to the engineer and the contractor. So, and they've been responding and making adjustments as necessary.
Has integrating it into the old systems been working smoothly so far? I know it's usually,
We're
There's-
not
there's
integrating with the
tweaking.
old system. The old system is archaic, so this is a new control system that is independent of the systems controlling the other equipment in the building.
okay, so anything that is being fed from boilers, obviously your heating loops are still the same,
Oh, yes,
so
it's just the controls.
just the controls.
Is separate, it's new controls that only apply to the new units that were installed.
So as we roll them out, are they being maintained consistently within the specifications that are within the contracts? In other words, are they proprietary to the district so that as we roll them out on a district level, we're maintaining the same type of controls in each building?
Yeah, well, what we'll require is when we put out specs for any new equipment or any projects in the future, we're gonna require these controls.
Okay, so we'll put through a proprietary resolution to make sure that it stays consistent.
Absolutely. We will not accept a substitute and, you know,
Good.
mix and match controls. No.
Thanks.
And this was the controls that was recommended by the engineer, that we use. And,
What type of controls are they?
you know, I knew if I said one more thing, you were gonna ask me the question.
It's okay, get
I
back
think
to
it's
me.
ATC.
I'll look at the backbone when we do our walkthrough.
I can get you that information,
Thank you.
or maybe it'll come to me between now and the end of it. And the last is, and, you know, we're doing LED upgrades anytime we're replacing light fixtures on the exterior of the building, and that's ongoing.
Are we getting incentives from them? I know there's a lot of good clean energy ones right now.
Because we don't have like a formalized program, it's just anytime they're addressing an issue, they're replacing them with LED. But if we end up entering into an ESIB, that's one of the discussions that we're gonna be having next month with the, when the architect is here, you know, with how we're gonna fund the facility condition assessment report or long-range facility plan. They'll be discussing, you know, ESIP as the Energy Saving Incentive Program as an option, as well as other
I know we can.
clean
we-
energy grants.
We can go back retroactively and get some of them if there's a larger issue, so just a note.
Noted.
I think you get about six weeks.
Over the EPA grant application? Yeah. Anything else on the facility project updates? Okay, observatory, I'm just gonna check off that it was on here because of last month we had the discussion, but that was covered by Dr. Gleason. School bus rebate program, we were fortunate last year to receive the grant. We replaced 5 buses, so we received $100,000. I'll tell you that we received our new buses. We submitted all the paperwork to the grant program, and we have in fact received our funds. And additionally, this year, we've applied again. We've submitted for 8 buses. Again, there's no requirement, or it's not a commitment that if we're issued the grant that we have to move forward and replace all 8 buses. But we had 8 buses that qualified for the program, so we submitted. So if we are awarded the grant, we can then make a decision if we want to do all 8, or if we want to do some number of them. I will point out that 5 of the buses If you look at the engine model year, it's 2000 and 2001. That's not the year of the bus, but that's the engine model year. But they are, in fact, 17 years old, 5 of the buses. Those are our flat-nose buses. They run for 20 years, and they have either 2 or 3 years remaining on them currently.
Brian, what does a bus cost? In
About
total?
$90,000. About $90,000.
90? Thank you.
So this is about a 20% rebate on
Yeah.
the cost of a new
And
one.
by the time we put the additional, between $90,000 and $100,000.
Do we have our buses on a cycle? I mean,
Yes, we do
Replacement
well,
cycle?
when we purchase them, we've always purchased them on a 5-year lease purchase. So even when we, and we try to, with regard to the account for purchasing school buses, we have our regular schedule where the buses can be used for, if it's a conventional bus, 15 years, if it's the flat nose for the 20 years, and then they have to be retired. So depending on, our needs, we replace them as they're retired. What we did a number of years back is we looked at it on a long-term goal, maybe not necessarily replacing every bus as it retires, whether it be, like if we're retiring 2, we didn't always replace 2. Sometimes we retired 2, we would replace 3, or maybe vice versa. We retire 3, we only replace 2. And the idea of it was because of the constraints of the budget. We have the 2% tax levy cap, which is restrictive, and all the other revenue sources are pretty constant. The goal was to try to keep that line account, pretty steady, pretty even. So even though, by a retirement standpoint, we didn't need to purchase a bus if we had the availability in that account because of, debt 5 years earlier, because we replaced 4 buses coming off the books, we would look to purchase a bus. And all that did was take an older bus and make it a spare earlier than what it would have. With also looking at our decrease in enrollment and reducing the number of buses we have. So, we've had that included in our budget presentation, the number of buses, kind of like laid out what the goal was over a 5 to 7 year period. So it is on a schedule on how we're looking to replace our buses and maintain the fleet that we have.
Do you see any challenges coming up where you have, say, maybe more than you can get, needing to come off the books?
Well, currently we're ahead because at
Okay.
the end of this year, we were scheduled to retire 3 buses. Last year, we were only required to retire 2 buses, but because we received a grant for 5 buses, we retired the 3 that we were retiring at the end of this year, last year, because we got $20,000 a bus for them. So right now, at the end of the current 1920 school year, we don't have to retire any large buses, but we do have 1 van that'll look to be retired. So originally, when we looked at that schedule, trying to keep that line account, on a constant, we anticipated retiring 3 and purchasing 3 after the school year, where we don't have that situation. But we had the bump last year, so we currently have it in the current year budget for the purchase of these buses. And we
Okay.
also applied the grant, so that kind of mitigated the hit that we took a year earlier.
So last question, just because I don't have the familiarity of where that line item is it in the operating budget or was it pulled out of capital reserve? Is it a reserve
No, it's in the
account?
operating budget.
Okay.
Because the only thing on capital reserve was in the 12 account for the capital construction projects. Those was the only line item that the capital reserve funds were used for.
Okay, and because it's a lease purchase?
And the lease purchase, it's under the transportation
Gotcha,
program.
gotcha.
Okay, any other questions on the grant? We've received it twice so far, but never back to back, but, we can be optimistic. Old Mill School quote for flood insurance. This information was included in the packet. The broker contacted us because it was identified that Old Mill School is in the flood zone now. The address came up as being in the flood zone. So we are covered by flood insurance through our Diploma Joint Insurance Fund, but we are covered for any claims or costs above $500,000. So the first $500,000 would be on the district. So the recommendation from the broker was to purchase flood insurance from $0 to $500,000, and considering whatever deductible we would look at. So they went out and quoted it. That was the attachment with Selective. They kind of circled the one with the highest deductible. The annual premium is $18,483. That's with a $50,000 deductible. So we would be responsible for the first $50,000, and then we would be covered from $50,000 to $500,000. If we were to move forward with flood insurance, my recommendation would be to go to the one right above that. It's $3,000 more of a premium. It's $21,505. However, the deductible is only $25,000. You know, we're not going to be making claims for $5,000, $10,000. If it's going to be I would anticipate that if we're going to have a flood incident, it's going to be significant damage. You know, so we're going to, you know, the fact that we're going to have to eat a $25,000 deductible, I would think in the scale of things that would be okay. But I think for $3,000, we cut our deductible in half from $50,000 to $25,000, which I believe to be, you know, worth it. And that would be my recommendation. However, you know, impressing the broker and Diploma Joint Insurance Fund with regard to, you know, identifying Old Mill School as being in the floodplain, you know, I included today was a floodplain map. You received it. So if you look at that, yes, the address is in the floodplain, but I'm not sure if it's hard to make out, but you know, right on the bottom center where right above the A is the building, I mean, it is literally like the upper left-hand corner of the building hits the floodplain. You know, the property behind it is, the property next to it, if you're familiar, like if you see where it says floodway zone AE, where you got the stripes, right below that in the center, that's Old Mill School. That's Old Mill Road running north, kind of up to the right a little bit. So it's the gray building is Old Mill School. The floodplain comes right off the corner, so that's the extent of, you know, the risk, I would put it. So I don't know that, you know, it would be irresponsible to say, you know what, we've never had an incident. We've gone through a number of hurricanes. The school's never been flooded, even though the surrounding area has been flooded. But I just wanted to bring both to you and get the board's input.
So, I mean,
$21,000 insurance policy to cover you for $25,000 up to $500,000 in the event there's ever a flood.
well, but there has been flooding over there across the street, substantial flooding, but it's never gone to the school.
Correct.
I
It's
mean-
gone 10 feet from the school,
Right,
or
but
15 feet, but it's never been in the school.
exactly, and I mean, that kind of storm, I mean, with Hurricane Sandy, we didn't have anything. We had major flooding across the street.
Although I think it's a little different there because I don't think the issue is like bay flooding or saltwater flooding. This is going to be a fresh, you know, it's old,
Yeah.
it's the Old Mill Pond, it's the stream, it's the lake there.
But
I
the-
mean, it would be caused by it being backed up
But
by
the town,
tides.
but the town also does, they lower the level of them. They go around, lower the level of these ponds now when they anticipate a bigger storm coming around. And I guess the only time that wouldn't work is if there was some kind of problem with the, you know, draining the water out. So I guess really what you gotta look at is that, have we ever had some kind of flood claim? Have we ever submitted anything for insurance?
No. We've never had an issue at Old Mill School. However, because they've redone the floodplain, the flood maps, Old Mill now is in a flood zone. Granted, the property is in, and it's the corner
Yeah.
of the building which is hitting the AE zone. So,
Which, if somebody goes back and redraws it, they could probably even take it out. So I guess my point is, would it be better for us to, since you look at the historical, you know, even in the last few years with all the rain and storms we've had, you look at what we've had, are we better off every year just putting that money aside and being self-insured to that $500,000 point where we have it and just leave it? And
you can't really do that. I mean, you can kind of theoretically do and say, you know
Right.
what, every year we're going to put $21,000 into capital reserve, and in the event we need to do something. However, we're not going to be able to draw on the capital reserve in the event we have a flood during the school year. Because, that's gonna be during the course of the budget.
Even in an emergency?
Well, what they're gonna do, though, is they're gonna go through your budget first. And, anything that's, in addition to, the old T&E, thorough and efficient, you need to use that first before they allow you to go into, your capital reserve. Especially if they go, wait a minute, you're in a flood zone, and you didn't have flood insurance, you should have prepared for it. But again, I think it's a low risk, but it is a risk. But we wouldn't be able to be self-insured just for that one component of it. And it would not be maybe as readily available as we would anticipate in the event, it was October and Old Mill School first floor flooded.
So Brian, this isn't required because we already have insurance, but it's just at a higher level, correct?
Yeah, our deductible is $500,000. So they're required to provide it. A diploma joint insurance fund is required to provide it because we're in the floodplain, but it's $500,000 deductible.
And the insurance covers the whole building, even though the front corner is the only portion that's technically in the floodplain,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, correct. And even though the school, because of the year of the school, the year it was built, the fact that the first floor is below what would be called the base flood elevation, it's grandfathered, basically, that it would still be covered. Like, if it was a newer building, you wouldn't be able to build it at that elevation and
Right.
qualify for flood insurance.
And this policy covers flooding from any source? It doesn't have to be a storm, a hurricane, a tornado,
Well, I think
or
there'll
the
always
ponds
be-
or whatever? Is there always that fight that's gonna be with insurance companies?
Yeah, the hurricane qualifier, that's
Right.
right.
The
Sandy was
winds
a
were only
superstorm.
100 miles an hour, or,
Yes.
the water came from the ocean instead of the storm, or whatever they're gonna argue.
Yeah, but I think it's a little different when it's flood insurance as opposed to like a homeowner's insurance
Gotcha.
policy.
And do we have any ballpark estimate if there was 6 inches of water in the whole school, what that might cost us to remediate, just as a ballpark estimate?
A lot more than $21,000. You
That's
figure
what I'm
if you
getting
pop
at,
the floor
right.
tile in every classroom on the first
Right.
floor,
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And for
and if
my,
there's carpets in
for
the
my 2
kindergarten.
cents, it's insurance, and millions of people have said it hasn't happened, and they said it in New Orleans, and we all know it's gonna happen sooner or later, so I think your recommendation of that, $25,000 deductible versus the one that was circled is certainly a wise choice from what I can calculate.
Any other thoughts?
Well, all the work that they've done, Spring Lake Heights, Spring Lake, Cedar, doesn't that count for anything
Yes,
in the last 10 years? Done a lot of
but somebody redrew the map.
Anybody else have an opinion?
What's our reserve account balance right now, just ballpark, on the cap and the maintenance?
The capital reserve is a little over $1 million, 1.1.
Okay. And our our
That's-
deductible without it would be 500,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's what was projected as the capital reserve account at the end of last school year. So when the auditors are done, if we're putting, because part of the resolution in June was to put funds, we have to put the funds that are remaining in our capital account, return that to the capital reserve account also. But
So do you have a surplus calculation from last year? Ballpark?
what we had,
Yeah.
it was, we put funds, because we broke it up, we put $695,000 into our emergency reserve account. We put a little bit of funds into the main reserve, and then we put well over $1 million into the capital reserve. Now, the difference though, and I've said this in a number of years, the 2 years prior to that, we did not have settled contracts for salaries. So that was always a projection. The 18-19 school year was a settled contract when we developed the budget, so we knew the numbers. So any additional funds that we would have anticipated for salaries aren't there. So we don't anticipate Other than what was designated by the June resolution, like we normally are at 2%, and then anything in addition to 2% goes into capital reserve, we could very well be in a situation where we don't have anything over that 2%. Partly because we designated funds into our emergency reserve for health benefits. All the balances in our personal benefit accounts, health benefits, pensions, Social Security, any balances remaining in those accounts went into the emergency reserve to offset future health benefit cost increases. Any balances remaining in the required maintenance accounts, 261, went into the maintenance reserve account. The balance, in addition, in excess of our allowable 2%, was going to the capital reserve account. So there may not be balance in excess of 2% going into capital
So
reserve.
there's no guarantee of that situation on a ongoing year-over-year basis?
Yes. The one caveat to that is when you use reserve funds to fund your budget, like in the current school year, we put $3.4 million into capital reserve. We basically funded our total capital construction budget with capital reserve funds. Any funds that go unused in the school year go back to capital reserve. They don't go towards your surplus. You can't put them in maintenance. Any unused funds from a reserve account go back to the reserve account. And that applies to all reserve accounts. So if you funded your maintenance reserve with $200,000 from a maintenance reserve, or your maintenance accounts, $200,000 from your maintenance reserve, and you only spend $100,000 of those funds, you need to return the other $100,000 back to the reserve account. It doesn't go towards surplus or budgeted fund balance into, use it for the following year. So, but that's still being ironed out with the auditors right now. So, again, the recommendation would be to move forward with purchasing the assurance with the $25,000 deductible with the premium of $21,505. And I would put that on the agenda for next week, so still have a week to think about it.
Anybody else have any comments on that? Any thoughts? Feel good about it, bad about it?
It's insurance.
That's, unfortunately, you're right. Okay. What, Hey, Brian, any idea what square footage of the building now falls into that? Is there, did they give a number? Just out
No,
of
they
curiosity?
only have it as the address.
Oh,
I mean, I
okay.
found,
Oh, the
this
flood map.
map,
Okay.
and, because I kept asking, do you have a document that, shows that it's in the flood zone? And what it, in the quote, it identifies the address and it's the current flood zone AE, the community number, the suffix. It takes a while for this information to download on flood map. So the broker also provided it to me, but in all honesty, I was kind of shocked when I saw it was just the corner. But again, it's just a map, it's just a corner. If the corner gets hit,
So is
it's
this,
a flat floor, so the rest of the floor should actually get hit.
But so with this particular kind of thing, it really doesn't matter if the building wasn't even necessarily touching that. It's just that the whole property is considered in that.
Yes, but
Okay.
we're only insuring the building and the contents of the building.
Right.
And it's $500,000 for the building and $500,000 for the contents.
this is the current flood map, though? Because this is from 2009. Didn't they update it after that? After Sandy, I think they expanded some of the zones.
I
They didn't
thought-
adopt
Yeah,
them,
they
but,
did.
When you go on the FEMA website,
yeah,
this is what they
have
provide.
currently.
Is FEMA the only one that offers flood maps? I don't know.
I want to say yes.
Okay.
I think that's what, FEMA insures the flood policies. They're insured through FEMA. So they base it off these flood maps, and I'm almost positive they're the ones who develop them.
Okay.
So what drove this? Because, I mean, it's been 10 years since this flood map.
Well, but currently, they're saying that currently the address for Old Mill School comes up as being in a floodplain.
Like, did we change insurance carriers or something that,
No,
Yeah,
we're in the
like red
Diploma
flag
Jordan
us.
Insurance Fund.
yeah,
I don't know that flood map for selected areas number effective on 9/25/09. Diploma Joint Insurance Fund notified us that we're in the floodplain now. And this is,
So they missed it for.
well,
10
and
years.
maybe what the FEMA website doesn't have it updated yet, and maybe the the updated maps, because I think they are still continuing to work on them, is actually
Yeah,
worse than this.
Yes, and that I'm fine with then, because I'm, just looking from this, it really doesn't look that threatening, but I do know that the old maps have larger,
The newer maps.
yeah,
They've expanded them. And
yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then, I can understand that.
any additional information I can receive on this, I'll provide to the board.
Yeah, I would just like to make sure it's not being a sales pitch of the broker to say your corner of your building's in here. As long as we're covered that it's a broader scope, that we're a little bit more at risk, then I'm, believe, prudently in insurance.
Well, the Diploma Joint Insurance Fund, that's included in our plan, our policy for that above 500,000. This is additional insurance for the stopgap. Well, and when I questioned the broker on it, and she provided me the quote identifying, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to ask the company providing me a quote for flood insurance, telling me, like, being my reason why I'm getting flood insurance, or
Right.
that's my basis, or what I'm relying on to say that I'm in flood insurance. So they provided me this, and I looked this up, and this is what it showed, where, again, that's why I brought it to the board, because it is, in fact, just the corner. But, again, if it's still 2009, but this is what's current on the FEMA site. Health benefit stop loss renewal, the recommendation from our broker has been provided. Just as a quick review, they recommended renewing with Horizon. It has worked well having them as our third-party administrator and also as our stop-loss insurer. The one competitive was Berkshire Hathaway. Couple differences between the two, and reason why the broker has continued to recommend Horizon. First, the contract type, if you look on the second or third line, is 3612 as opposed to 2412. What that means is the 36 is the window of when a service could have been provided, and then the 12 would be the time period when it's being paid. So this is for 2020. So anything that's paid in 2020, but the service was incurred over a 36-month period, or that year and the 2 years prior, it would be covered. Under Berkshire, theirs is only 2412, so it would have to be a service that was provided either in the current 12 months, 2020, or in 2019. So you lose a year. The likelihood of having a claim that was in, I guess, 2018 being paid in 2020 is slim, but there is that possibility, and it just provides further protection for the district, or covers a longer period. Additionally, like between the two, just when you're looking at the annual stop-loss premium, about midway down, it's a $29,800 increase from our current premium, where Berkshire is a $6,000 reduction from our current. So there's about a $36,000 difference between the two proposals. But if you go down further, where it has annual claims at max, under Horizon, our annual claims at max is $12,858. Under Berkshire, it's $12,858,000, as opposed to Berkshire, which is $14,190,000. So what that means is we have additional liability of over $1 million with Berkshire than we do with Horizon. So for $36,000, being that our refunds on the stop loss are a lot smoother, they're realized sooner, and we don't have the exposure of an additional $1 million, I would go along with the recommendation from the broker and stick with Horizon.
Anybody have any questions on that?
As an additional note, we talk about the state health benefits program. There's two times we do it. One, we're doing the stop loss now, but at the end of the school year, the third-party administrator services go from July through June, and we typically compare ourselves to premiums on the state health benefit plan. Well, for 2020, the state health benefit plan has reduced their rates. So this will be the first year going into 2020, if things don't change with the state plan, that their rates will be less, about $65,000 less than our premium equivalent rates. Now, we've always maintained that when we say premiums, the cost of single member spouse, parent, child, or family, that the rate it has always been less than what the state health benefit plan is. And where that comes into play is as the staff contributes toward health benefits, they're contributing based on a percentage of that premium. So if we were in a state plan, they'd be contributing based on a percentage of the state plan rate. For Wall Township, because we're self-insured, we have premium equivalent rates that are calculated by the broker's actuaries. And our premium equivalent rates have always been less than the state health benefit rates. It looks like in 2020, that won't be the case. State health benefits will be less. However, the plan for state health benefits at one time it was pretty close, or apples to apples with the district, but the state is moving away from the apples to apples plan where, they're being, prescriptions are being forced to be generic as opposed to brand name, where we still have the option for brand or generic. Maintenance prescriptions are required to be mail order as opposed to the district still has an option. So although all those plan changes in the state plan have not been finalized, but it's something that we're going to monitor, and we'll monitor where we are, as a line item for our self-insurance plan to see if, how different the state plan is with our plan, and whether we want to consider moving to the state plan, which would probably never be recommended, or at least review our premium equivalent rates and make an adjustment to them either mid-year or definitely moving into next year. Because last year on a line account, it's a $11 million line account, and at the end of the year, the balance in the account was about $24,000. So the account was pretty consistent. We had a significant increase recommended by the broker for 1920. So combined with the significant recommended increase in the cost to run the plan and the decrease in the state plan is why 2020 is going to be the first year that their premium rates would be less than ours. But we want to monitor, and if we may be coming back to the board and looking to either adjust them mid-year or see how the plan is running. So more to come on that probably perhaps in January. So that will be on the agenda next week. Student transportation facility, the lease agreement was received from the airport. That was provided to the board members, and the recommendations by the board attorney, and again, that'll be something that'll be continued to be discussed, and without question, that's an executive session topic. But I didn't know if there was any questions or concerns. What we've also, at the same time, we have funds included in the budget for improvements that we would need to make relative to the shared service agreement with Howell. So, on a timing issue over the next 2 months, we're going to have to make a decision whether, the airport is going to be the solution, whether we're going to move forward with the shared service agreement, or if we're going to be able to maintain the status quo where we currently are. So,
Do we have an idea when the feasibility studies are going to be done?
facility condition assessment?
No, the feasibility for the
Oh,
transport.
sorry. I'm thinking by the end of the month, so the
Okay.
beginning of December,
Yeah, I know it's been in process.
yes. Let me write a note to make sure I follow up on that. Yeah, part of that, they request information, like a will serve letter for sewer services from the municipality, and as long as they receive that information that they requested, I believe the anticipated completion date was going to be by the end of November. So. With regard to the long-range facility plan, the last meeting with the architect was on November 4th. It was with the architect and the building principals and Dr. Gleason. So chime in if you would like with regard to that. If you recall, it was kind of like a two-phased approach with regard to the facility condition assessment. One was a walkthrough of the buildings, them evaluating the facilities and their current condition and the costs to make improvements, whether it be code compliance, or just upgrading the facilities. And then the second part of it was improvements that, or renovations or changes that would be required based on proposed programs or changes in the programs. And apparently there was some good discussion, some great ideas, very expensive ideas probably.
We had a principal meeting last Monday, and the architects reviewed their preliminary proposed changes based upon the questionnaires that went out to the principals. And, there was, it was just the very beginning stages of what some principals thought were, I think they thought they would have gone further with some of their proposals, and in other cases, they went maybe beyond what the scope of, the questionnaire went. So we had a general discussion around what would be realistic, what were priorities, in looking at some of the rendered drawings of some of the new re-envisioned spaces. Some of the principals did not feel that was in line with what they were looking for. And so there was some good discussion around kind of like taking a first stab at it with these first drawings. But I think in some cases, they'll be going back to the literal drawing board.
And moving forward, the discuss with the architects is we're looking to bring them back next month in December at the workshop meeting. Similar to the presentation they gave with regard to facility condition assessment, now it would be the combined. We're taking the feedback on the facility condition assessment and then also incorporating, the discussion based on the program, the proposed programs. And then trying to lay out a plan on, the best way to tackle the needs of the district on both fronts, and also to discuss with the board the different options available from a funding standpoint to fund the long-range facility plan. So we're going to continue discussions this month with them, but the idea would be to have them come back at the December workshop. And we good? Okay. Concludes plan of facilities.
All right. Okay. Any old business? Anybody have anything? Seeing none. No new business. All right. Time for public comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't know if this falls under new business, but a number of us did attend the New Jersey School Boards Association convention, and I think it's important that the whole board knows about that as well as the public. Just speaking for myself, I focused on sessions that had to do with the role of a board member, in particular with the workings with the superintendent, with superintendent's search. We did have students present at the STEAM competition, and I believe it was high schoolers, right?
Yes, we had the two high school girls that developed that sports jewelry case to keep jewelry safe. They did very well in their presentation. They were extremely poised and articulate. They finished in the top 11 out of 34 schools that presented, but they did not win. And we got those results this past week because it was combined with the NJEA convention. So students would move on from school boards to NJEA, but then the finals were at the NJEA.
It's convention season. It is. Yeah. And there were a lot of workshops that were not necessarily sessions that you signed into, but they were in a lab-type setting. There was one session that was of particular interest to me, and it's been discussed about referendums and what things are needed in advance of even putting forth a referendum that the district should do. Best practices for successful education foundations, which we have the Crimson Knights, and I shared that information with them. There is actually a state association for education foundations, which I did not realize, so they have developed some standards and some best practice models for Crimson Knights to take a look at, and ours is relatively new. I think we're in, 2 or 3 years. And then one thing that was an aha for me is that some of the things that we are experiencing as a board in terms of culture and working together, it's all across the state. All of the boards that, not all of the boards, but many of the boards are experience the same problems that we are, and some of the sage advice is that these things take time, that there has to be good communication, and that we should reach out for help. And I know the New Jersey School Boards is one of those organizations. There's many other professional associations that we can tap into. And then personally, I attended as a parent the Title I presentation on the whole district's approach to helping students do their best that are challenged in some way. And Dr. Gleason and Aaron Embaum and Mr. Abil and some of your supervisors presented on those programs. And being that my sons are actually in the programs, I can attest to the value of that and the good work that is being done. And personally, that my youngest son got probably one of the best report cards he's ever gotten this first marking period. So I want to say thank you for that. We'll see what happens marking period 2. And good luck to the football team. And the soccer team, everybody.
Girls soccer.
Girls soccer
Boys
team.
soccer team, and the cheerleading. You're gonna have this
Yeah.
place, it's gonna be like
It's
National Station.
been a great year for our sport teams so far. So actually under new business, today, and Andy was there, we attended the Veterans Day celebration here at the school. And I'll tell you, it's the 3rd annual one. It was the first one that I got to go to. They did a phenomenal job. I think Dr. Skinner helped put it together, correct?
Yes.
Maybe one of the, probably many
She's
people.
the supervisor that is associated with the Service and Leadership Academy, but it was the Service and Leadership Academy, the NNDCC students, Dr. Skinner, members of the advisory board to the Service and Leadership Academy, which Ken has been a member of that advisory board, were certainly instrumental in the program.
Phenomenal. The band, the chorus, just an incredible ceremony, and it was nice being there with so many veterans. I mean, there was a nice group of veterans, and certainly appreciate their service to our country. My father was a World War II veteran, so I certainly appreciate everything that generation and generations after them have done. And with that, I'd like to recognize 2 veterans that I know of on the board. General Kendrick Wondrak, former Marine and Army General, and Corporal John Sullivan, Marines. Thank you guys for your service. We certainly appreciate it.
Ralph, on the positive, continuing with that, I'd also like to say thank you to the public that participated in an uncontested election and came out so strong for the purpose of putting candidates in the position that they're in. It speaks volumes to what people don't always say, is that there is a lot of support for the schools. And I just want to say thank you. I'm speaking on my behalf, but I'm probably speaking for the other 3 individuals that were recently elected. I was very impressed, and I want to thank you for doing that.
Yes, it's great when people come out and vote and exercise that right, and certainly we appreciate it. So with that, anybody else? Anything new? No, seeing none? Okay, public comment. Please come to the mic.
I'm Samantha Bassett. Well, that's not, I live in Wall Township. When parents began expressing our concerns about the trailers on August 15th, we were told by the administration in both emails and at Board of Education meetings that the condition of the trailers in photos and videos in the media was not the condition of them during school when students and teachers were in them, and that nothing was being covered up by the administration. I'm going to hope and assume here that all of you here have seen the emails, work orders, and attached photos from November and December of 2018. And I'm wondering if you agree with those statements made by the administration after reading them. On November 24th, 2018, a teacher's foot went through the floor of the trailers near where the students hung up their coats. That same day, the principal of Central emailed Mr. Romano saying that the trailers were rotting away and that a teacher fell through part of the floor. She wrote "help!" in her email. I'd be very surprised if this was the only time she reached out asking for help, and if this was the only person that she reached out to in the district. On November 30th, Mr. Romano emailed Mr. Smythe explaining to him that the situation was more extensive in terms of the deterioration than just getting a contractor to re-side the trailers. He further explained what he thought needed to be done. Mr. Smythe replied that it was best to create a plan to get through the school year and do extensive work in the summer. Students and their teachers were then knowingly kept in unsafe conditions for 7 more months. Further, the scope of the work that was actually planned for July for RIS to do was to replace the siding and some other exterior work. That quote contained nothing about repairing the floor or the interior, despite administration knowing that there were issues. On December 12th, 2018, Mr. Monahan sent an email to Mr. Romano which states, "Bob, Tom opened up the wall at the trailer that had the most recent complaint of the deterioration, and along with the hole in the floor we covered a week ago that I looked at, I really think we need to look further into this, as this structure is showing signs of significant damage and rotted beams. We cannot, in good faith, ignore this. I think to have an outside professional or engineer advise us, or this may come back to bite us in the butt if we keep covering this up." Photos showing extensive deterioration and rot were attached to the email. Mr. Romano responded that same day saying, "Okay, thanks." This email led to a meeting inside the trailers that took place on December 14th, 2018. At that meeting were Mr. Smythe, Mr. Romano, Mr. Monahan, and Tom Abagidi, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. So now we've had a teacher, the principal, an employee for the district that worked on the trailers, the operations manager, and the facilities manager, all expressing their concerns about the condition and safety of the trailers and expressing their discomfort at the attempts to cover up what was going on. District employees were trying to do the right thing here, and yet the students were in these conditions without their parents being informed for months and months. It isn't best for any student in Wall Township to breathe mold and sit in unsafe and infested classrooms until the end of the school year. Letting the trailers get to this point was extremely problematic. However, not doing anything about it once you knew how serious the deterioration was is worse. There were district employees that weren't okay with what was going on, and it appears that they went properly up the chain of communication. Why wasn't anything done with their concerns? We know that the teachers have their union that helps look to their interests. This board has the board attorney to advise it, but as a parent, I want to know who in this district is advocating for the students and prioritizing their safety. Yes, the students have their parents, but in this case, their parents couldn't advocate for them and couldn't do anything about the unsafe conditions they were in because they didn't know. No one disclosed to the parents that their kids were sitting in rotting trailers. infested with ants and termites and breathing in. I think, should I just keep going? Or? Oh, okay. And once parents did know, and once parents did know, they were told by administration in official communications and at public meetings that this wasn't the condition they were in when students and teachers were in them and that nothing was being covered up. We know that isn't true. Parents only know some of what we know now because of Oprah requests being filled, not because anyone was forthcoming with that information or sought to give the parents a full and complete picture or timeline. I realize that many of the board members are new and that you have been put in a difficult and challenging situation. You put yourselves forward saying that you were up to the task. There was wrongdoing here. It's your responsibility to investigate it and do something about it and ensure that nothing like this ever happens in this district ever again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Betsy Cross, I live in Wall Township. It's been a long 3 months, and more information keeps coming out. And in Mr. Smythe's summary, when he, number 3, Oprah, he should list exactly how many Oprahs there were, how many were completed, how many are pending. He should list his hours, and he should list how much it cost. Because if he broke this out, the majority of it would be on the Central School trailers. So out of the 54, probably 50 of them are on the Central School trailers. So I wouldn't have had to have put those in if I hadn't have driven over there on the 18th and seen those trailers and said, there's no way this just happened in 2 weeks. It's been really upsetting. And the more and more that comes back, the worse and worse it is. So a number of Oprahs came back today, and I'll read some of those so that they're on the record. I did give them to the Co-Star. I hope she can write about it. We knew this was an unsafe structure, and when Mr. Romano came in, when Mr. Torrance came in, it was deemed an unsafe structure. I mean, anybody, I'm not in construction. I went over there, and anybody could realize that. So the board should all have to tell us, the people that were on the board, when you actually knew about the damage in the trailers. Mr. Smythe, we know, was not forthcoming, and he didn't know on just August 16th. He knew way earlier. Samantha just went over all those emails. It's in there. All the Oprahs that have come back now, today, they show holes in the trailers going back to, I'm seeing 2013. October 16, 2013, water is leaking from the toilet in the trailers 1 and 2. In that picture, that's where you see that water underneath. Who knows if it's raw sewage, but this is back to 13. October 31st, 2013, repair hole in siding on exterior of trailer. On November 15, 2013, Tiffany is asking that the 4 classroom doors in the trailers have locks installed on them. Thank you, Tiffany. You thought that the trailers should have locks. Did we not have locks for the first 5 years on the trailers? February 26, 2014. Water is leaking from above the ceiling outside the 2 trailer classrooms, and when it snows and freezes, the water dripping causes ice to build up on the doors and they cannot open them. July 10, 2014. Get quotes to install vinyl siding on the trailers at Central School. You writing all this down, Mr. Smythe? January 13th, 2015. A piece of sheetrock in the ceiling has rotted, a hole in it from the water leak. Please repair. Thanks. September 9th, 2015. To the left of the above door, the wood on the bottom of the trailers is rotting and a hole is starting. Can you please replace? This goes on and on and on. This was over 100 pages today, and I just kind of circled the ones that were disturbing. Here's another one. There's so many holes in the floors. A hole in the floor. This is in May of 2019. I'll jump ahead. Then October 4th, 2019. Toilet is leaking at the base of the boys' rooms, trailer 1. That's October 4th. So what is under those trailers? Was that raw sewage? June 10th, 2019, the girls' bathroom doors will not lock. And then, while Mr. Smythe is out on vacation, could you answer why the dumpster was put there and then it was removed? I've sent a number of emails to Mr. Smythe, Mr. Adonisio, Ms. Dyer, Ms. Gleason, Jeff Bertrand. Got the complete runaround on everything. And now on 11/5, when
Ms. Cross, you have 15 seconds.
Yeah, when Mr. Smythe is on vacation, it says, status was changed to work in progress. It was assigned to the operations staff. As per Brian, conceal portions of trailers that were open for reconstruction.
Ms. Cross, your
Can
5
you-
minutes is up. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, Mr. Adonisio, can you tell me why he was concealing what he opened for the renovations? And why you didn't answer me last week when I asked you what was in those dumpsters and where the dumpster went?
Thank
Did
you.
you destroy
Your time is up, Ms.
documents,
Cross.
contents that were in there?
Your
I'd
time
like
is up, Ms. Cross.
I'd like you to answer those questions.
Thank you.
I'd like to go over the 5 minutes if I have the,
No, you don't tonight.
you're not going to let me as the president?
I am not.
It's on the record?
It's on the record.
You just got renewed, or, you ran to
Thank you,
run
Ms.
for
Cross. Your
transparency?
time is up. It's a consensus of the board tonight.
Well, all right, raise your hand.
Ms.
Let's
Cross,
see.
Ms. Cross,
Let's-
Ms. Cross.
If it's a consensus of
Cross.
the board, raise your hand.
Mrs. Cross, last chance. Your time is up.
Last chance. Where are your attorney bills, Michael Gross?
Ms.
They were
Cross,
due.
You're going
They're
to keep
not
talking,
in.
you're going to cause the meeting to be adjourned.
I'd like your attorney bills, Mr. Gross.
Sure.
Kathleen Duran, I live in Wall Township. I have also read the same Oprah production that shows that all the representations that Brian Smythe has made to date, both in writing and to the board, have been inaccurate as to the date of when he knew that the trailers were in bad repair and should not have students or teachers placed in them. And the board just keeps looking, and they've encouraged it, and they've rewarded it. He just got a raise. How many meetings ago? Even with people standing here telling you, he knew, the truth will come out. The truth has shown, unfortunately for Mr. Smythe, that Betsy was accurate. Those documents, without argument, show that Brian Smythe and his staff that he was responsible for had knowledge of the condition of those trailers, and that all those statements he made about how we're going to try to do our best and figure it all out now, it was all a bunch of hogwash. And the $14,000 in Oprah bills because of the 219 hours that have been spent breaks down by my calculation to approximately $64 an hour. I don't know who's doing it, and Ralph, I'll ask the question through you. I'd like to know who's actually performing the Oprah searches, and is that $64 an hour reimbursing somebody or compensating somebody for the hours spent searching the records or for copying time? Because I have a suspicion that a good portion of it might be just for copying and making $64 an hour. I'd like that type of job to be put out for bids, and I'll have my kids apply. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that Brian Smythe has, for the past couple meetings, complained of the burden that the Oprahs have taken on him in regards to the trailers, when it turns out he was lying to our faces about when he knew and when his staff knew that those trailers were in bad repair, it's almost mind-boggling. The thousands that we paid for the Oprahs, the vast majority of which were Betsy or other parents who learned about the trailer problem through Betsy, that's just a price for some poor decision-making and for what I call obfuscation. It's just the price. If things had been done right, and I was one of the people standing up here asking Mr. Smythe to amend that chronology that he gave to actually indicate what was coming out week after week in the Oprahs. Just tell the truth. All anyone ever asked for was what happened when, who knew it when, and why certain decisions were made. And the falsity of it just is appalling. And that it was rewarded by the board with a raise, I find equally appalling. And I also would like to suggest that, you know, given the number of Oprahs, I would suggest that some of the time that you complain of Mr. Smythe is due to your own inefficiencies. I've noticed and pay attention to how many times you are postponing searching for some things that are actually simple Boolean searches. So I would suggest that maybe part of the time is due to your own office or your secretarial staff, whoever's doing this, IT, I don't know, I have no idea, but their own inefficiencies in searching or maintaining files properly. It shouldn't take this long to run a Boolean search to ask for 2 weeks of emails between people. I mean, it took a month to come back. What's with that? It's a 10-minute search. It's not hard even for somebody who's, you know, my age and can't even form Boolean searches properly all the time. It's not hard. And to see that kind of hours rack up for something that's simple, I don't get. I also want to know why and you didn't have the auditor. When you mentioned that the auditor was in, I don't know why you didn't have them look at the quotes for the repair of the trailers. As I pointed out to you, you really have to be on the right side of this, and I'm urging it one more time. Did Brian split the work to keep each portion of the quotes that were sought to repair those trailers below state bidding levels by splitting what was an $80,000 job into two smaller bills, to two smaller projects? He was able to escape bidding. That's not proper under the state bidding regulations or laws, and I suggest the board look at this and get on the right side of it before there's any more fallout. As to the stop-loss renewal policy, I don't understand why you aren't taking the $36,000 less charge, because I'm not sure that Wall has ever used the 36-month look-back. Kind of like what you said about the flood insurance. If the district, I mean, has never used that 36-month look back, why are you with Horizon instead of Berkshire for $36,000 less in the savings? Same for the state health benefit plan option. If your
Mr.
broker,
Ann, you're at 5 minutes.
Oh, can I just finish my sentence?
Yes.
If the state health benefit plan is less right now, $65,000 less, why isn't your broker putting you into it? Why are we walking away from 65 and with the Berkshire policy, it's 35, that's $100,000. I don't understand why we're walking away from that kind of savings at all. And everyone's just sitting nodding their heads. I don't get it. Think about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none. Add?
Not at this time.
Mr. Smythe, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay, thank you. At this time, could I have a motion to go back into executive session for number 1, number 5, number 7, and number 8? No action will be taken.
I make the motion.
Could I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.